Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Julie Maxton. I'm the Executive Director of the Royal Society, and it's my great privilege and pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. 2017 is a special year for the Royal Society for lots of reasons, not least because it is the 30th anniversary of this book prize. And we are really proud at the Society for having nurtured this prize over the last 3 decades, of course with help from our sponsors, Insight Investment, and with help from you and previous prize winners and our publishers. You'll be hearing from some of our prize alumni on the panel this evening, but we want to give a special thank you and congratulations to Mark Miodownik, one of the event speakers tonight, previous winner of the prize in 2014, and yesterday just announced that he's the winner of this year's Michael Faraday Award for Public Engagement. So this is our most prestigious lecture award for public engagement, and no pressure, Mark, but we're expecting something big, you know? We believe at the Royal Society that science books should absolutely be part of the wider cultural conversation. Science permeates all aspects of our society, and many of the major questions in front of society today can't be answered without science. So, for example, can we feed a growing global population? Should we change a person's genetic makeup to prevent or cure disease? How do we keep our privacy and security in an increasingly digital world? We all need to be informed and scientifically literate, and masterfully written popular science books have an important role to play in that. Tonight we'll take a look back at some of and see how far science writing has come, and we'll also look to the future. And we intend to be part of that, championing excellence in popular science for many years to come. So we're also very pleased tonight to announce the results of our Inspiring Science Books poll. This is not a competition, this is just a poll that we launched to see which books inspired people. Over 1,000 people took part in this poll, sharing their personal stories of the science books that have stayed with them long after they finished them. We had 11 books featuring in the poll, chosen by our indomitable librarian Keith Moore, whom many of you will know. And the top of the poll, and I emphasise not a winner, but one that featured the most often in people's inspirational stories, was Richard Dawkins' book, The Selfish Gene, followed by Bill Bryson, A Short History of Nearly Everything, and in third place, Charles Darwin's classic, The Origin of the Species. So many people seem to have read it, and there we are. Of course, there were others that people mentioned that weren't in the 11 that Keith selected. So, for example, Carl Sagan's Cosmos. Maybe Brian Cox voted for that one. Gerald Durrell's well-loved book, My Family and Other Animals, and the book which was recently made into a film, Hidden Figures. So it's been fantastic to see such a diverse spread of books being championed and debated, and I think it's just wonderful that popular science writing is achieving the place that it should be, the place it should be in society, of inspiring people to read more, to think more about science, and to understand how science is absolutely fundamental to so many of the issues that we face today. So it just is left for me to hand over to Dara Ó Briain to take you through the rest of the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julie. Charles Darwin's livid, apparently, and is changing his agent. It is delighted to be here. Welcome to the British Library for the celebration of the 30th anniversary of the Royal Society Science Book Prize. There are just some brief notes we have to give. We are guests of the British Library. We're also streaming this to libraries across the UK, so big hello to everyone there. Pleasure to be hosting the event tonight in partnership with the British Library and Living Knowledge Network, and we're discussing the art of science writing, which I think is a deliberate choice to bring both art and science together, is as often so as many of these books do. For those of you who are watching who would like to tweet about this event, the hashtag is #SciBooks. And for our library viewers, if you'd like to try to join the discussion, feel free to tweet questions in, and then we'll try to get those involved in the discussion as it goes on. I'm going to add just briefly a couple of words as to my involvement with this thing. I chaired the prize giving in, I think it was 2014. I've been involved in science communication, generally on the television. We've done 8 years of Stargazing Live, we've done a maths show, and we've done various science shows. I've worked with one of our panelists here, where long before he was a Faraday scholar, he was putting a brain into a liquidizer. So I'm not sure if he's going to repeat that trick for you. But so involved in this, and I have a science book actually for kids that were for the first time. We're writing a show called Beyond the Sky, which is basically how to explore the cosmos and space for 8 to 12-year-olds, which is coming in September. So I sweated in the same furrow as many of you have in terms of all the coming from a different direction. And we'll obviously discuss many issues in terms about coming from the many different directions that we have here. And we have a fantastically august panel. After the event takes place, there'll be further mingling time taking place. And as well as that, you'll see scattered around the area there the various prize winners in the 30 years of the books that have been awarded the prize by the Royal Society. Please, please don't steal the books. That is not the point of leaving them out. You have to leaf through them and draw on some of the ideas briefly and then buy them, for God's sake. Also, we have Dana Carter at the other end, which is well worth seeing. There is, as a kind of a service of the British Library, have brought out first editions of various, like Newton's Principia is there, Einstein's first treatise on relativity is there, I believe. Darwin's book, so cruelly overlooked in the poll earlier, is also there if you wish to revise your vote. It's also there. So there's a number of some of the most august and important pieces of science writing are just down the corridor around there. So please go in and have a look at that. It's often just a pleasure to see these things as they actually exist, rather than just as legends. We have a fantastic august panel themselves here, ladies and gentlemen. Joining me, former host of Tomorrow's World, a science writer herself, and broadcaster, but also a nominee for this award in 2006, shortlisted in 2006. Please welcome Vivienne Parry, ladies and gentlemen. In the middle there, we have a former science demonstrator on Dara Ó Briain Science Club, hence the brain in a liquidizer, and measuring the speed of light with cheese on toast, which is it was a good experiment. Didn't work, but it was a fabulous idea. Please welcome the Faraday scholars at the full term for it now, all the way from the long walk from UCL he's made today, ladies and gentlemen. For that alone, please welcome Mark Miodownik, ladies and gentlemen. And an honour, as it always is, in the few times that I've already worked with her, one of the most important discoveries in the last 50 years of astronomy made by this woman beside me here, and deservedly regarded as one of the greatest scientists that the country's ever produced. Please welcome Dame Jocelyn Bell Burnell, Chair of the Judges here in Actually, if I may come to you first, by the way, because one of the questions I think we should ask is our own personal history with science writing. Was there a particular piece of writing that inspired you?
Yes, there was. There was a book that was very important. I was in secondary school. It was clear I was good at physics, and I was looking around to see what bit of physics. And my father brought home from the public library Fred Hoyle's Frontiers of Astronomy, which I removed to my bedroom and read from cover to cover. I thought, right, if I can, I'll be an astronomer.
And what was it about? I mean, was it that the discovery spoken of, or was it his passion for it? How did it?
Well, Fred, of course, was a very good communicator, both spoken and written. And he was clear. It was quite a tough read for a teenager, but I could already see that some of the science we were learning at school was applicable in, the way galaxies rotate and things like that. So it just connected me with astronomy in a wonderful way.
Is there a similar book that you have, for?
Yeah, so I was at school, similar sort of probably age, and I was enjoying science. I wasn't very good at it, and somehow I got hold of Primo Levi's The Periodic Table, and that's a great book because it doesn't ostensibly set out to teach you about science. It says science, in his case, mostly chemistry, is just part of his life. It's his job. And yet he tells these stories, and that you think, wow, you're an interesting person. You've had such an incredible life, and all of it, chemistry was pivotal. You think, wow, it is part of culture. It's part of who we are, and that was the first time I really understood that's what science is.
Mm. Vivienne?
So my book that got me into science was called Tiny Toilers and Their Works. And it was about social insects. And I just thought it was fantastic. And it was a very kind of folksy written, book about, how mother ants do this. And, it really engaged me. And then actually the book that I loved and still have by my bed and I dip into really quite often is The Voyage of the Beagle. I just thought that was the most wonderful book. I absolutely loved it. And it was funny, I often told my husband about this wonderful Tiny Toilers and Their Works, and it had, long disappeared. And the darling man bought it for me as a present, having scoured the internet for it. And there it was. I half expected to open it and it said V. Mills inside. It didn't.
Because the book that started the passion for me was In Search of Schrodinger's Cat by John Gribben, which was
I read that.
And it's a really good primer of quantum mechanics and explains all the wonders. But I was 14 or 15 when I read that. What age were you when you read Tiny Toilers?
Oh, about 8 or 9.
Oh, sorry. So is it younger than that again for you?
Yeah, 15.
15, and for you?
Much the same again, yeah.
Right, okay. So there is a point. Whereas you were ahead of the curve, Vivienne, congratulations. As usual. There's something to be said of keeping at the back of the mind that there is, when these books are written, there is a generation, whatever about writing for a general audience, there is also a small audience who are just approaching this kind of reading, that they might hit it exactly, this might be the most, fallow turf, this might be the best place to land this, like whatever. Is that in your minds, by the way, those of you who written, is that in your mind that you could obviously entertain or educate, but you could end up inspiring people?
I mean, personally, I was driven to write a book because I had a great story to tell. And I'd wanted to write, but I hadn't got a story to tell for ages. And when I look back at all the things I wrote, they're terrible, partly because I just didn't have a cracking story. And I think that is what is the hallmark of a writer, which is that you nose out a good story and one that hasn't been told, or at least hasn't been told the way you're going to tell it. And it took me a long time to realise what the story I wanted to tell was. But once I had it, it wasn't. Then it was just a question of trying to work out how to get it onto the page. It wasn't. I wasn't so much thinking about different audiences, I suppose.
Were you thinking about the audience at all, actually?
I was obviously thinking. I don't
mean that.
No. I was thinking.
A ripple through the crowd. I've read the book, and that is not a review.
Okay, so I had this theory which someone told me, and I should be able to credit them, but I actually can't remember who it is. But one of the great science writers in this room, probably, I happened to come across, and they told me that the world is split into 5% of people who are naturally interested in science and engineering, and you can write any book, and they will literally give it a go to read it all the way through to the end. It doesn't matter how many equations, facts it's got in it, or tenuous links, they will struggle through. And then there's 95% of the people who will not do that, and they won't even pick it up. And you have to really have a great story to tell them. And I wanted to go for the 95%. So that when you're saying, did I think about audience, I was definitely going for the 95%. How to get to them? Well, I thought I took my lead from Primo Levi, which was, it's about humans. Science is a human story, so it's got to be about us. And then I thought, well, I am not as interesting as Primo Levi. I haven't lived through the Holocaust. I haven't lived through a pivotal time in human history. What have I got to say? And then as I sort of mined my own follies in the world and realised that, I had been stabbed and that had, and that's a dramatic story. And I realised a way in.
And I gave you the through line into what you were doing. When you're writing, are you thinking of an audience specifically for it?
Always. But remember, I've been a newspaper columnist and I've been a tabloid columnist. I was the main woman columnist of the News of the World, for heaven's sake, for a long time. Although I just want you to know that I am the only science journalist, who was writing for the News of the World and the Journal of Molecular Biology at the same time.
Same stories? Same stories?
No. Kind of subtly different. But actually, what that taught me, that was a hugely valuable experience, because I think there is a bit of us in scientists that think that other people ought to know what we know.
Definitely, yeah.
And actually, they don't. They really don't need to know. And we want them to regurgitate almost the things that we can talk about in the language that we talk about it in. And so actually that tabloid experience was incredibly helpful, because it helped me really explain things in stories that people would understand without being patronising, and sort of bowled them along and made them think, I must finish this. This is a really interesting thing. What happened next? And I think those kind of stories that relate to real people who have something that is something that's similar to you are the ones that really resonate.
You've not written a book?
No, but not yet.
Not calling into question your right to be here. Any particular reason, by the way?
I do a lot of lecturing to all sorts of publics.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy that, and it takes up quite a lot of time. So the book's going to come later, whenever that is.
There are a lot of agents in the room salivating as you're saying that.
It's quite a good story, though.
Yes.
I've heard you tell the story.
Yes.
It's an amazing story.
But it's much more fun to tell it to a live audience and get the feedback. To sit at home, on your own, trying to keep going.
So rather than burn the material in a book, you'd sooner keep it for a series of live gigs. I absolutely get where you're coming from. We have an interesting mix in that regard. You are a professional science communicator, have been your entire career. You've written in many ways. You are bridging that. You're currently working as a scientist and then have written, communicated. You, working as a scientist, have not written. So because there is a whole thing about, and this is one of the most interesting facts that we discovered in going through this, of the 30 years of this prize, and I don't know if you've seen this, how many do you think were won by scientists writing about their work versus science communicators writing about science? How do you think the split is?
Ooh, I'm guessing it 60-40 with the science communicators on the 60 side.
It's going more towards the communicators.
Yeah.
Think any?
I reckon it starts out being scientists, maybe 25%, and then it becomes more. Everyone else realises this is such a mine of great stories. So 25-75, I reckon.
25-75. It's practically 50-50.
Yes.
50-50 between the two. And it's carried on. Obviously, by the way, one of our absolute favourite thing is the very first winner of this. You can see the genesis of the evolution of science writing. The first winner of this in 1988, Living with Risk by the British Medical Association Board of Science. That was the first of these books to win. Yeah, but it is actually split between those who communicate and those who actually do things. But they're two very different ways of approaching it, presumably. Two very different stories to tell. Do you think that you collectively as scientists have a responsibility to try to communicate those ideas to a general audience?
I do. I'm not sure that all my physics colleagues would agree with me. I think they feel I'm prostituting the subject.
By letting people know about it?
By simplifying it sufficiently that a non-physicist might possibly understand it.
That's the big difference. Yeah. That's the difference between broad brush and detail. And actually, if you do the detail, people get lost along the way. But if you do the broad brush, then they pick it up. But the trouble is, I think for many scientists, they find it really difficult to communicate with an audience that is not their peers, because they're frightened that back in the lab, people will say, you did that book.
Yeah, you'll bring it all back to me now, because you said, did you think of the audience? And I'm just remembering now that all the way through writing, I was thinking of my colleagues. Actually, mostly I was thinking, will they let me get away with this? This statement. Can I get away with this statement? Can I? Is it really absolutely, completely true? It's obviously mostly true, but is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Should I put a footnote?
Is
it a footnote?
Is it? It's not a viva.
No, but that is exactly what's going through your head,
Yes.
right? The whole time, and you're like, okay.
Well, there is. I mean,
that really gets in the way.
It is one of the reasons it can be very frustrating to interview scientists at events like Cheltenham, for example, where they won't actually commit to it. Like every sentence comes with a series of caveats. Where, well, obviously this happens in 95% of the cases, not allowing for situations where this is a different thing that happens, and this is building on work done by other colleagues, and then we'll list all the other colleagues and going, just say yes or no. Just say whether the world's going to end in a week or not. Just give me the headline, please. I know I don't seem like the person who's ruining this for you, but this is very difficult.
And what is it about the Pew Pew, Barney McGrew, Cuthbert Dibble Grubb that they all have to say
all the names? I had a huge honour of interviewing Peter Higgs at Cheltenham a couple of years ago, and every answer came with the other 6 named as well. Every answer he would go, and obviously as, and then would do them all, and you're going, just take, we're in a tent. We're in a tent, for God's sake, just enjoy the glow of it being yourself. But there is, do you think that's, can strangle it? If the desire to be, it is a sliding, it's a scale, and slides from journals to making it too ridiculously simple, but there's some, where is the right way to place this?
I mean, I learnt it off doing radio and TV, so before, because essentially these people are experts, and I was allowed to come into their world to tell bits of material science, and I said, oh, this is how I think we should tell it, and they were like, no, that's not how we're going to tell it. And I go, yeah, but aren't I the no. No, this is how we're going to tell the story. And after a lot of that, I realised of course, they tell really enthralling, interesting stories, and they get the thing. And it was about, you need to know as much as you need to know to get to the next bit. No more, no less. Tell me what I need to know. If I need to know a fact now in order to understand this next bit, and I want to know, then tell me the fact. Otherwise, don't digress. And I think I learned a huge amount from all of those media, TV and people, because I really feel they know how to tell stories, and they know how to tell really kind of compelling stories, and it's that trade that,
And did you not think the very first time you ever saw a science TV script, you thought, oh my God, it's like,
appalling.
Play school, it's appalling.
Yes.
And yet, it was compelling television.
But isn't this because, in the case of TV anyway, this is my theory, that it's an emotional medium, it's not a factual medium anyway. Like, what you're trying to get across in a TV programme is, I love science, I love what I'm doing, it's really interesting. Look at my face. Look at these really, you don't want people, and there are a couple of facts in the pub or in the bar later that people can remember. But it's not about, it's not about learning. I know that sounds weird. A book is slightly different, isn't it? Because a book you feel people go back to, people underline, and actually I learned a lot about science from these books. I learned pretty much all the genetics I know from Dawkins, and Stephen Jay Gould and all the other people in this room, like Steve Jones, these people. I read your books, and I read it because I didn't do biology, and I wasn't doing biology because of the crazy British education system, and so I was at university doing maths, physics, chemistry, and I needed to know biology. I knew I needed to know it. How was I going to find it out? So books are slightly different, aren't they? You do need the facts also come into it. It's not just an emotional medium. It's both, right? And that's the hard bit.
But there's one very interesting difference. When I do a talk, I ask the organisers what the audience is going to be. And pitch accordingly. With a book, you can't do that. You pitch what you think is best and set it loose. It's an interesting difference.
But it's a ruminative art form in the sense that it will sit on somebody's desk or by their bed for some period of time, and they can dip in and dip out. They can set the pace. Whereas if you sit down, for example, to watch an episode of Stargazing or Horizon or whatever, it's there and it rolls ahead, and it can be very pleasant as an experience to see this happening in front of you, to see the science being explained, and for it at times to go in one eye and out the other in terms of what you're seeing. But in a book allows a richer engagement, because you can then stop if you're going, well, that's actually too much, but I'm going to come back to it.
Read it, yes.
And I can let that embed. And I can return. You can set the pace for it. So I think you have to set the pacing of it differently. I think yes, you're right. Television does have to be takeaway. Here's what you can take away from this, in a way that books don't have to be. You can go deeper with books. Oh, that's the hope anyway.
Yeah.
But are you afraid you'd lose, Peter? Where is the debate about what are you trying to teach here? Are you trying to entertain? Are you trying to inform? What are you trying to achieve?
I don't think you're ever trying to teach. I think teaching is not the right word at all, or educate. It's that old sort of model of, the public as kind of some half-empty glass. Mm-hmm. And if you fill the glass with from the jug of knowledge, then they'll kind of get it and be... And I don't think it's like that at all. I think you need to inspire and enthuse. And if I've managed to inspire and enthuse, then I'm happy. Because I'm not there to be an educator. That's what teachers do much better than I do. That's what schools do. It's inspiring people to think, oh, I really want to know more about this. I think the great television programme and the great book are a bit the same, in that you go away thinking, oh, I really want to read another book about, whatever it is, materials.
Yes.
Yes. But you're
there
not...
There isn't another book about materials.
Yes.
There's just Mark's book.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you're not using the word amaze. One of the things I would try to do is amaze. Now, maybe
but
that's
you've got
I'm
the subject for amazement.
Yeah, okay, right. End of issue, yes.
I think they're all amazing. I think what I like about the mundane, or the seemingly mundane, is that this thing that you can say to someone, have you ever really thought about a glass? Like, what is it? Like, why is that transparent and this not? Like, you can actually amaze people with the stuff that's right in front of you. And I think that is something to aspire to. But I do think that a book, you tell a much longer story, and you take that. People spend months, and that is the great privilege of writing a book, is that people write to you afterwards saying, I've just spent the last 3 months with you in my head, like as a voice, kind of, and I think that is something great, and so you take them into your world for much longer, and a much maybe deeper immersion into your view, and because it allows you to do that, doesn't it? And that's what my private theory as to why actual physical books, the paper of physical books, it's now winning again versus the digital book, because there was this moment a few years ago where Kindle and all the publishers were really worried that the electronic book was going to sort of obliterate the physical book, and that's now stopped, and now physical books are on the up again and overtaking Kindle. And my theory about that is that this book, actually the physical object kind of represents the person who's written it in a way, and you open it up and you kind of are in their world, and you put it down and you're out of their world again. Whereas when it's on a Kindle, there's too many other worlds competing for your attention, potentially, and you can stop and read another book completely with one touch of a button. Or if you're on a laptop, your email will ping up. And I think so the physical book is a portal into another world, which is kind of orchestrated by this author. And that's such a fantastic thing to do as an author, if you can create it. It just happens to be factual.
Whereas if you do a lecture, some of the audience try and get you into their world by sending you a great fat envelope saying, I think Einstein's wrong, here's the correct version.
What colour is the ink?
Yes. Blue, yes.
Should they be difficult? Should a science book cause head scratching? If it's a difficult topic, and if these are things that colleagues who have no wish to engage the public think this is just too huge an idea and too difficult to explain, should the books be difficult? Should they be something that's a challenge?
I think there's a danger that they may remain unread on the shelf if they're too difficult. And people acquire them as kind of baubles to show how clever they are, but they haven't actually read it. And of course, they're going to be found out now, aren't they? Because, of course, with Kindle, you can find out how far people have read. And quite often, it's really not very far. I mean, I always remember I had to report on a lecture by Roger Penrose, who won one of the prizes. And I remember understanding the words, but not the sentences. And I had to report on it. And I said it was the intellectual north face of the Eiger, and I failed to make base camp. And it was a terrible feeling. And I think that if you get that in the first chapter, you're just completely at sea, then I think you've got nothing to hold on to, and you just give up.
If it's too easy, though, it's a little bit unsatisfying. You need a bit in it that you really have to work at.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think you need to start off gently, because I think if you plunge people into something that's so difficult they just can't get to grips with it, 4 pages of equations.
But that's not how it's been in the past, has it? And the bestsellers are, I mean, we're saying this, but actually, if you look at what sells, impenetrable books do sell. And so people clearly do want, they want.
Coffee table.
And also,
yes,
I want it too. I want to be this towering intellect that is so amazing that no one can really understand my book. That is de facto.
I failed at being a towering intellect a long time ago.
I have Emperor's New Mind at home. And Cedric Villani wrote one recently, a book about the birth of a theorem. It is literally unreadable. It is.
But he does comic books. Have you seen his comic books?
I haven't seen the comic book. I'd hope they're more readable than Birth of a Theorem. And I like maths, but it was like then we remunerated the matrix. And you're going, good for you. Yes. And this is really difficult.
He does all these bande dessinée books, which are fantastic.
Listen, Gloria.
But their own French.
Yes, well, that
which
in
is
itself has its own unreadability about it. But should you aspire to push people a bit in these things?
I think you should.
Yeah.
A bit. It's just getting it right.
Yeah, no more than any other author would. No more than any other would wish to say something profound if you're writing a book about the human spirit. You'd want to say something that's difficult or challenging and that people wouldn't automatically find it easy. We're not, I mean, there's no reason why science books shouldn't have their page-turners and their literary fiction as well, that they can't exist on a number of different levels. No more than anything else. If you do a science show on BBC One, it's very different to a science show on BBC Four. There are different audiences out there. So it's a case of knowing your audience, presumably.
Yeah, I mean, and also I think that the boundary between fact and fiction is quite an interesting one to explore, because is the truth completely in facts, the truth about the world? And of course it might be the truth about what we currently think we know about the world, but it may not be the truth about the whole universe, let's say, or what the world could be, especially sort of in my area where engineering creates new worlds, and that's essentially its kind of hallmark. And there's a big history of fiction writers kind of coming up with great ideas, and science fiction like Asimov. I mean, you didn't mention him, but I'd be surprised if the kind of great fiction writers also haven't inspired lots of people to become scientists. Certainly in my case, Douglas Adams, I think of as a very deep thinker, and he's not thought of as a kind of intellectual colossus, but I really highly admire him, because I think he got really great, amazing ideas about the future and the present in a very readable form that was genuinely funny.
And he talked about Babelfish. I can do translation.
Right, so this is
Here is my Babelfish.
Yeah, there's the Babelfish. Yeah, Google Translate.
Extraordinary.
So, and that strikes me as kind of an interesting kind of juxtaposition, because what is true, I mean, the Reith Lectures recently by Hilary Mantel. Sorry, I was about to blank then. And, she makes the point that, what's true about the past is perhaps not just the purview of historians. And I wonder if what's true about science is not just the purview of scientists or people who write solely factual books.
But if you're a scientist writing a book, presumably you'd be very nervous of being speculative, or or being vague, or
wrong.
That hovers over science more than it does over fiction writers.
But it depends how your time frame, because actually in 25 years' time, who cares whether you said something was right or wrong? And it depends, of course, when in your life you write it. But actually, a lot of people will just put stuff out there as a means of provoking others.
Well, also, that's invention, isn't it? That's creativity. That's exactly the thing that sparks ideas. I mean, I think that science books don't just maybe enlighten people, inspire people, and bring them into the profession, but they also provoke new possible futures, let's say, and that's kind of like fiction in a way, isn't it?
Also, yes, and I think it helps scientists out of their silos, because if you're a scientist in a particular discipline and then you read a popular science book in another discipline, actually it starts you thinking in a whole different way. So we think of our audience as just being the kind of the man on the street or woman on the street, but actually it's as much other scientists. You know, where's the great book on social sciences, for instance, that will help physicists understand or, you know, medics understand where they need to be thinking and how they need to be thinking.
Does popular science tend to focus on the result to the detriment of focusing on the process of actually working as a scientist? Yeah, and I'll say this specifically because I went to university fed by exciting images of black holes and, you know, quantum mechanics, and then went into the lectures, and there's a lot of Fourier transforms I had to learn how to do, and there was a lot of statistical stuff. And I remember sitting, particularly in quantum mechanics, that I'd read this book about, and it was exciting because there were clouds of electrons and things that appeared, disappeared, and then it's on a blackboard, and you're going, I'm not seeing any physics at all in this. Where's the big picture stuff that I was, and it was like 4 years into the degree, right at the very end, we were doing this 3-page thing, the Schwarzschild solution or something, and said, and when it equals 0, therefore black holes, and you just moved on, right? And you're going, really? This entire path was to get back to the thing I already knew about, because I read it in a book at 16. Was I ill-prepared? Because we do have a tendency to focus on just, this is the result. And I mean, a perfect example, the result, would the book by you about your life be about the result about pulsars, or would it be about being in a field, putting together a telescope on the ground and then going through the actual work that's done?
Well, actually, 50% of it would be about being a woman scientist of my generation, which is another whole story. But I think I'm quite a good raconteur, and I enjoy telling a story. And one of the most fun things I ever got to do was I had the Faraday Award that he's just got from the Royal Society. Do you remember how the world was going to end when the Mayan calendar came to an end? 21st of December 2012? I decided I'd look at the astronomical evidence behind that. And I did a whole series of talks about that, and there was huge, huge fun. And I was quite sorry when the world didn't end. But what was very interesting, I think something else we need to address, listening incognito to members of the audience afterwards. I don't think she's right. I know in my bones that a planet's going to collide with the Earth and it's all going to end. You present all this stuff, clearly, fun, rational, and they still don't believe you. Some of them.
You say about the process, think about that, you know, the one woman scientist that everyone knows about, Marie Curie, and the way that her life was romanticised. You know, she was this, you know, poor woman in a garret sifting through tons of pitch blende. And so we got nothing but the process. I mean, sure, we heard about the Nobel Prizes, but it was, you know, really devastatingly hard, awful work. And you wondered, you know, whether actually that put people off, frankly. It was a terrible thing to read. I mean, she had these burns on her fingers and terrible ill health.
But then do people arrive in going, listen, when is the Nobel Prize ceremony? I've got myself a tux. And they go, no, you've got to do burns on your fingers for the next 30 years first. Is there, and I'm not saying this is the wrong thing, it may be absolutely the right thing. And it may be for some people, the last thing you want to hear is historical biography about, you know, you want to get to the result, you want to actually get to the science they did rather than them. That's a whole other issue of whether it should be about the lives of scientists or about the science itself. But do we tend to romanticize the big results and get to the end without?
I mean, I think it's just about a rollicking story in the end.
Yeah.
Like, and whether if that rollicking story involves the person, great, because that's great. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. I mean, and I think that storytelling is something that is such an art, and you learn it off other storytellers, don't you? You learn it reading great books, but I didn't explicitly understand it. I think because it's all great books. They're so they hide all the sweat, don't they? It looks so easy. It's all just, it flows so well. And I think that it's talking to other people who've struggled and learning the craft of writing and telling a story is the hard bit, and the thing that takes you ages to do. And some maybe the sort of stories that you tell are the ones that you are people-centric, and other people tell the ones that are about facts. And that's yeah. I guess you find your niche, right? And but yeah, I think that's something no one ever really told me when I first started, let's say, trying to communicate science, that it's all about storytelling, that learning how to tell a story is the thing. but I only learned it as I realised what works and what doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in your academic life, presumably that's also the case, isn't it?
It is. I know that now, but no one told me that either. So writing a great grant for money is about writing a great story. It really is.
Yeah.
It's like, this is where we want to go, and why we want to go there, and this is how we're going to get there, and let me take you on the journey of exactly step by step how we're going to get there. Of course, you aren't going to do that when you actually get the grant, because it's a fiction, but your ability to tell that story compellingly is just, it makes you a better scientist, because you get the money and then you get to do the great work. And also when you write a scientific paper, the great papers, the ones that you really do read from end to end, don't just dip into the data for, they get you from the first line. And I do deplore the kind of state of paper writing. I know a lot of scientists always say that, but you know, that also deserves. There should be actually a prize about great science paper writing, actually, because that needs to rise. I think Royal Society's done a great job with the book.
Which is not just about the result.
No, it's about
the story.
Yes, the story.
Yeah.
Mm. What great science book would you hope that the public in general would read? Is there any particular classic book that you would recommend, or you think that should be in the same way we have a canon of literature? That we like to, we teach Shakespeare, we teach whatever I don't know what you'd put onto this. So what would you put onto this for?
The Age of Wonder, Richard Holmes. I just think it's the most wonderful, wonderful book. I've reread it several times, and it just gives you such a flavour of the ferment that was going on at that particular time. I just think it's a fantastic book.
I go for this book called The New Science of Strong Materials. I know it sounds a little bit dull, but it is a rollicking tale. It is, yes. Because people will come across that book, but they won't come across this book, and it is really worth. Honestly, look, yeah. Amazon, great. It's still in print. It's like 1977, I think it was printed. It's still, that's how good it is.
Is that a textbook, by the way?
No, it's not. But it does have equations, and it has that level of detail which you're like, whoa, do we need to go into this level of detail? But then he makes you realise that you do. Yeah, in order to know why cathedrals have buttresses, for instance. You know, all those questions that you may not have thought you wanted to know the answer to, but now you do. And right from the word go. It's a great book.
Some Ian Wilson books like that I had at university, I just thought were amazing.
Yeah.
For some reason, there were always great psychology textbooks. I remember I never did psychology, my sister did it. But psychology textbooks, it was clearly the topic that people could be dry and amusing within. Because I remember she had one textbook and it had about Pavlov's dogs. And its description of Pavlov's dogs was, every day Pavlov would come in and he'd feed the dogs. And then one day he came in and he saw that the dogs were all salivated, even though he had no food. And the text there said, most scientists would have simply accepted the compliment and carried on with their day. That's quite a delightful thing. Is there anything in particular that you think should be, that everyone should know?
I can't think of a particular book at the moment, but the kind of genre that I think it would be. You just talked a little biographical story. I think biography of people who have enjoyed their science, I think, is immensely powerful if it's well written. So that's the kind of thing I think I would encourage people to read.
Sorry?
And would you, because I think one of the things that's fascinating is when you're reading about someone that you really don't know about at all, and then it's just this complete revelation of something that you didn't know about at all. I mean, the von Humboldt story, for instance. Yeah. But, just lives that you didn't know about. And I think that's one of the great pleasures of science writing is bringing a story that's never been told before. And actually, there are a mass in women scientists.
Yes.
Absolute masses of untold stories, which are just fantastic.
Women science writers, I mean, there is a lack on this list of 30.
There is, isn't there? 10% of them are female.
However,
two of those in the last couple of years.
2 years, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, taken as a very short scale, they're completely dominant.
You're cooking the data richly.
How dare you say that? How dare you say that? That I manipulated the figures in any way. I put my scientific reputation on the line for this. But I haven't seen the long list to find out if that's a general trend, therefore, that it is actually equalising a lot more. But there's certainly a scope.
In the whole history, there have been 2 sole authors and 1 co-author.
So, I mean, in terms of the shortlist, in terms of the nomination.
Oh, yes, sorry,
there's a general movement towards which is significant. But there are so many stories unwritten.
Yeah.
Including your own.
Yes, Dara.
When are you writing the story that I've seen you deliver, and it is and I've seen rooms captivated by it?
Yeah, well, it's much more fun to speak it than to sit at home and write it.
It is actually. It's much more fun to speak than
What
write.
about if somebody else came to you wanting to write your story? Would you want
a wee bit
that?
protective?
Yes. Well,
no, yes.
So
bad,
you've got to sit down and start writing. Jocelyn.
Yes, I hear you.
I'm entirely with you. Keep the material, just it's very wise to go. We have some questions, I believe, coming in from the libraries around the country. Do you want to we can read the question from the computer there. Obviously.
Yeah, hold it. Okay, we've got Elizabeth Wainwright, who is watching at Exeter Library, and she asks, why do you think there's a growing hunger for nature writing, and how can this translate to action on climate change?
Anyone to come in on that?
Well, I know that shortly we're going to be 90% living in urban environments, so that's probably a lot to do with why we're interested in nature writing. Maybe it links with what we ought to be doing about climate change. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just, I feel a lack of greenery from my block of urban flats.
Okay, fine. So that wouldn't necessarily extrapolate across to I'm changing my lifestyle. I would just like to,
And look at the way that flower fairies, do you know about flower fairies? Wonderful, I think they were in the 1930s, something like that. I'm forgetting the author now, but she did these beautiful... Frances Hodgson Burnett, and did these beautiful little pictures. And I learned a whole, I'm an avid gardener, and I learned all my flower names from those little storybooks, those little pictures. And I think it's taking people to understand their natural world when people actually don't experience it, as you say, Jocelyn, themselves. And I think maybe that they do become much more action-orientated after they've read those kind of books.
We can see some fashions passing through the winners, but are there certain topics that just are easier to write about, certain fields of science which just the public just are an easier sell, let's say, to the public?
Oh, well, stop doing no more string theory, no more consciousness.
No, people love quantum mechanics. They love. I mean, there's always 10 books a year on quantum mechanics. I mean, it doesn't seem to be. There's no, and when you think that tells you that the publishers know they sell, otherwise they wouldn't be commissioning them. I think there's loads of books about genes and biology, and again, that's who we are, right? So I think, and also that science is moving so fast. I can really understand why that's such a popular theme.
Space is easy, isn't it? Space is very straightforward.
Dinosaurs.
Geology, on the other hand, I think that geology books, that seems to be the category that is, how often do geology books come out?
It was Lyell that inspired Darwin. And
but there's not like 10 geology books a year. No, why is that? No. Because the volcanoes erupt. The whole planet is constantly in change. Mountains are being built. You go to the beach on holiday, you look at, I don't know about everyone else, but I constantly think, oh my God, I don't know the name of that rock, but I think I should.
No. That is literally nobody else's reaction.
There were some nods.
A
few nods.
Oh, I should know the name of that cocktail, but I don't. But I don't care. I'm about to have an anonymous love affair with this cocktail. I don't know. But yes, because it's basically a lot of stones, man. It is. Yeah, but some topics just seem to be, easier to create wonder in.
But I wonder if that's the phase that geology is in.
Yes.
At the time where they discovered seafloor spreading and understood about continental plates and why South Africa fits with South America. Was there a rash of popular geology books at that point? Does anybody know?
The only book I remember of recent years is Richard Fortey's book on geology.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes, he's done several.
And I can't think of those books you're talking about.
It's the next thing. The next thing is geology. I'm taking that instead.
Okay, you heard it here.
Yes.
Was there another question?
No, go to the audience.
Okay, great. Any questions from the audience? Yes, yourself there, and then we'll go to you after that. We'll go to that lady first, and then that lady there.
Hello. We've talked about the lack of communicating stories about women in science. It's obviously a lack of talking about minorities in science and things like that. But also, a lot of science books and science stories tend to be around, there was a great man and he did a great thing. Mm-hmm. I write stories and books about science, and people are grumpy. There are arseholes who work in science. I mean, there are, right? And I think sometimes we're at risk of almost lionising scientists as being amazing, wonderful, good, virtuous people, and rather than saying, science is a human activity, it's humans that do it in all our wonderful, some people are great, some people are pretty shitty. How do we tell these stories while keeping the amazing wonder in science, but actually being realistic about the real nitty-gritty of how it was done? Because it isn't always done in wonderful, the right ways. Sometimes it's done underhandedly or by people who take the credit for other people's work. Should we actually be more realistic about how we tell these stories?
Yeah, Darren, defend Newton.
What? Are you one of the Leibniz people, are you? Do we tend to eulogise? Do we tend to create saints and...
I think I think that's absolutely true. I think there's a slight problem in kind of libelling. That's the problem. I think so. People probably are worried, like in contemporary science. And then if you look, I think historical science does bring those stories out because they are dramatic and well. The other thing I'd say is certainly in the engineering side of things, that in the 19th century, it was a lot of this work, 18th, 19th century, a lot of this work's done by these very rich people often, and their stories are well told, and they can be horrible and bad. And then as you get into the 20th century, it gets done by corporations, and they can be just as horrible and nasty as great as they can be great. Witness Google. But I mean, I don't mean that, but its first line when it was born as a company was, do no harm. And it seems to have lost that kind of. It doesn't sort of big that up anymore. But corporations, it's very hard to get inside corporations to tell those stories. And I think that that's actually really problematic because a lot of great stuff comes out of Google and all the others, Facebook and the others, but it's within a kind of firewall and people don't tell those stories. And that's a shame. And I think we need to find a way to tell the stories of these organisations because they are more and more kind of, science is done as a team, engineering is done as a team. And yet, the team, that story doesn't get told. It gets told with space and Apollo and all that stuff, but not toothpaste and, mobile phones, and which toothpaste is really interesting, by the way.
There also are, I suspect, good stories around how some of these falsehoods were exposed. I'm thinking of one in particular. I think his name was Sean in Bell Labs, and I'm going back probably about 12 or 15 years. And he had an amazing number of papers in Nature and Science. He was a material scientist working on devices.
Is this a good story or a bad story?
Well, it's an interesting story.
Okay.
And nobody could reproduce his results. And I was at Princeton at the time, and a young woman postdoc got a mysterious phone call from somebody in the same establishment as him saying, just look very carefully at those curves. Look at the little noise wiggles. So she did. And it was exactly the same graph, sometimes stretched that way, sometimes stretched that way, sometimes turned upside down. But he had one set of data, and he was establishing all sorts of amazing results with this. And very risky for a postdoc without tenure. She took this on, and she and a Canadian colleague exposed him. Now, she had to move from Princeton to California and change field. He was already tenured, so he was in a safer position. And interestingly, he was sacked and then got a job with a commercial firm who saw that if he could convince that number of people for that length of time. So there are a lot of wonderful stories around, but some of them can't really be told, as you've been saying.
That is the thing,
But we do want always to make a hero and a villain. That's the nature.
That's true, yes.
That's it. But if Lisa Jardine did set the record straight with Hooke and his relationship to Newton. So,
You had a question there,
I work with scientists, and one of the issues we have increasingly from research councils is impact. Do you think that the storytelling art of science writing should be brought into writing research papers? Because quite often we hear people saying, oh, we know what we're saying, but we can't make that available to a wider audience. So should some of the skills of science writing be brought into actual journal article writing? I know you've alluded to it already.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think the kind of move to open access has been really important in this sense, because by having open access, so anyone can access the research papers, it's encouraged the journals to kind of say, well, you need to have a kind of summary that is really understandable by anyone, and I think that's kind of going some way towards it. But I do think that that actually the whole way in which science journals get refereed now is about the fact that they got to hold together in a watertight way rather than be understandable. And I think so they basically get refereed into often incoherence. Yeah. And then, you know, as an author, you're like, okay, if you want it that way, but you know, this is a year in, and many people know what I'm talking about. And so you take out graph 3 and you kind of modify that, and then the paper is no longer this thing that you wanted it to. And so I do think that the journal and the editors should take a leaf out of the Royal Society's book and start to try and kind of say, you know, have a prize for the papers that really sing, and the quality of the writing is much better, because it's definitely, in my view, on the way down on that front.
But I do think people will never write the impact studies in the language that would be, you know, appropriate to a general public, because they are so worried at being judged by their peers. And remember, you know, impact cases, they are hugely important, hugely important. Definitely. So people don't want to stray outside the box.
Yeah. But the other side of the coin is that the average citation for a paper is 0, right? So people spend ages doing the work and publishing it, and then essentially, it's not that no one reads it, but no one cites it on average. And if you say to them, and this is, I think, well documented by Nature, that actually, if you make a more readable paper, it will get cited more because people actually understand it, then, you know, it's in everyone's benefit.
Would it be a huge change to the system if, because they're laid out, and I see it in that very formulaic way. Yeah. If after abstract there was like punter abstract, just Joe Public abstract, which just was a paragraph, even that 3 sentences, that just says what this does, this particular.
But to be fair to journals like Nature and Science, they do try, in a sense, to do that, in that they pick out 1 or 2 papers and have a news and views item or a special editorial about it, kind of unpacking it for the non-specialist. Yeah.
But what is interesting is that if you look at grant applications where there's always a requirement to have something in lay language at the end, what you see is sometimes a completely different project described in the lay language to the actual project itself, which is always a bit alarming.
You're going to say something?
Can I just say, I mean, the whole business of actually writing academic papers, you know, you hide the real story. Okay, I mean, you could not write a paper which said, you know, I was thinking about this problem and I was about to step on a bus and it suddenly hit me. How it works, you know, and what you do is you couch it all in, sort of here are the assumptions, and then I work through it. You don't say that actually I had the answer and then I work backwards, so that you take the human side out of paper writing.
Okay, but I agree that's true, but I think in most cases, but I'm a great defender of the formula of the science paper in its structure, because I think that all formulas and abbreviations actually are really ways to communicate more clearly to people who initiate it. And I know that it's a bit of a language thing. So I think that it's not the format to describe the human journey. And I think that's fine, because there are other ways. You know, you can write a book, and you can write a magazine article, and you can give a talk about how you got to the answer by it. I think what it's about it's about what you did. But I still think it needs to be really clear, and I think sometimes the repackaging of the fact is that you got the first result last and the last result first, and then you repackage it into this story, and it is a story, a research paper. That is about communicating something true, and if, as the author, you don't feel that paper says something true, and of course, you might be mistaken about truth, and you know, but you have to be convinced it's true, and you have to be trying to communicate the truth. And I think that's different from communicating facts. And I think that's where the system gets in the way at the moment, because the system often, and I don't really blame anyone for this, I think it's just a very complicated system which is under-resourced.
Well, let's go, because this obviously we're drifting away from our read materials. Anyone else want to ask questions back about, and rather than not on academic papers, on science writing? Yeah, there you go. Thank you. I was there, and then we'll go to you after that. Thank you very much. Yeah. Oh, no, you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that lady there.
Yes.
No. Yes. Thank you. And then we'll go to that lady at the back. Thank you.
Okay, so this is not about academic papers. A couple of points. First, when you talked about most children only know about Marie Curie, well, many in the audience may know this, but certainly my recent experience with the 6- and 7-year-old granddaughters is there's a fabulous book now on 100 famous women scientists, of which Jocelyn is one. And it's beautiful, brief biographies, not making them to be great heroes. And many kids I know around that age are totally inspired by this. I hope there's going to be 100 famous MEM scientists as well. But, I mean, these are super books, and I think, you know, things are changing, and so I'm optimistic. But the second point I'd make is, do you really, to come back to something Jocelyn said, my experience is that it's now almost attractive when somebody's coming to interview for a postdoc or PhD studentship with me as a scientist, and I also do science communication. They find that an attractive thing, that I do that as well. And they want to learn more, and they want to learn how to do that and do that alongside. I think it's changed, you know, in the last 30, 40 years when you were thought to be prostituting yourself if you tried to communicate. I mean, would you all agree with that?
Yes. Yes.
And as a general, does it make you a more employable? I'm not sure how the system works in terms of in postdoc and all that. If that you can do this, is a thing that I know there are structures in place. I'm not familiar entirely with the word, but is it a thing that's encouraged more now to communicate?
In theory, at least, yes.
Yes, I think that I do a lot of training of early career or mid-career academics. And actually, in theory, as you say, they're encouraged to do it, but not all of them want to do it. And if people don't want to do it, please don't make them. Because there are some scientists, frankly, that should be locked into cupboards rather than have them meet the public.
With their equipment.
With their equipment,
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas, and I think what you have to get out there is that it's okay for the junior to take on the role of communicator for the team. If they do it well, then applaud them and let them get on with it. Don't degrade what they do as somehow being fluff.
Don't you think there are some journalists that should be put in a box too? I scientists in a box rather than anybody else.
Are we allowed to look in the box? Are we? Is a journalist alive or dead in the box? There are many questions and answers in the box. Been profound questions about the box that we don't know. Yeah, it's kind. Mark, what material would you make the box out of? Is it increasingly important to communicate? Is it something that, and is it something that the younger scientists see as a possible path, a career path?
And it's definitely changed a huge amount in the last 10 years. It's a sea change, and that's just great. And it's so heartening because you see this next generation coming up, and they're brilliant at it, and it's just they just think it's part of the job, and I think that is where we want to be. That it's just normal to do this, and I know there is. In another 10 years now, there will be no remnants of the curmudgeons, I think, in the system, who are still around a bit, I think, but mostly it's changed, and it's brilliant, and I think people like the Royal Society and the BBC have really been instrumental in getting that to happen. So that is fantastic.
You had a question at the back there.
Yes. So speaking of putting journalists in boxes, I write about science for The Sun, and often I am blocked by scientists who don't want to contribute to The Sun for whatever reason. It's a shame because we reach hundreds of thousands of people every day on our science stories. What do you think about scientists who have a political view on where their science should be shown? Should they just put that aside and should they give it to the mainstream, or should you keep it for The Guardian or the BBC?
Oh, I am absolutely. I've got very strong views on this. I think you've failed if you only put your science in The Guardian. I mean, great and august organ though it is, actually, if you can manage to get your science into The Sun and do it in a way that it explains it simply and neatly. I mean, I always remember the Mirror and the Human Genome Project. They did a double-page spread on the Human Genome Project, which was just an exemplar of how science should be explained. And it got out to, millions of people instead of a few 100,000. And actually, we should aspire to do that. We shouldn't be snobby and say, I'm sorry, you read The Sun, therefore you shouldn't have science. I'm absolutely with you. I think we should be aiming to do much more in the tabloids on science.
Well, I think I'm going to put a different slant on it, though. I mean, I think that, let's face it, I mean, science is like any other human activity, is part of politics. It's not immune to politics. It's not outside politics, in politics. And I think that, so therefore it's part of the political landscape. And I think and it's becoming, and I think scientists are realising that in order to create a new society, the one that they want to create, and they're not speaking as one voice anymore, which I think is a good thing, actually. But I respect their right. I respect their right to recognise certain publications as biased, and to not go that way,
But if you don't engage, what you create is a vacuum.
No, I'm not saying not.
That mad people fill.
Agreed, and I think that, so I'm thinking you have to, so I think the science as a whole has to engage, but you have to engage truthfully, right? I don't think you can kind of just say, okay, I feel like it's all neutral. This guy's laughing. Go on then.
Just what?
I mean, the idea that you cannot engage because you think someone is biased because you can only speak the truth is a
No, your truth. No, but surely you have one, right? You have a truth. What you think is true.
Well, it changes each day as the evidence changes.
Fine. So you might talk to the Sun in a year's time when you think that they represent your political view.
Well, I will write for the Sun, I've written for the Guardian, I've written for the Mirror. I'm quite happy to write for anybody who will listen to me.
Fair enough. But I think that's a different point from me. I don't think it's laughable.
Sorry, you.
Does anybody remember Ronnie Bedford? When I was involved in the Royal Society's report of 1985, and which is basically why we're all here, Ronnie Bedford was the doyen of science correspondence, and he wrote for the Daily Mirror. And he wrote extremely well, and you can write for the Daily Mirror, and you can write well, and you can be accurate. And so I totally agree with that point, but it's not a new point.
Okay, so we are running close to time. Can I get to Jocelyn on this topic? Yeah.
I think the answer has to be yes, but I'm personally a bit conflicted because I still remember the son saying, girl, 36, 26, 36, finds aliens.
And can I just say that when Dorothy Hodgkin won her Nobel Prize, the Daily Mail's headline was Oxford housewife wins Nobel.
Yes, yes.
You can't personally be blamed for these, by the way, right? Not your doing, right? Is there a fear, by the way, I don't say it's very, and just throw it to the panel, that people worry that the work has nuance, or it's only true in certain cases, or in a certain percent, and it's like a statistical thing, that when it gets reduced down to that kind of format, that it will be, the headline will make it look ridiculous, or is it fear by scientists that keeps them from engaging with the most mainstream of media?
I think there's a fear of social media. I think if you take a view that people don't agree with, and then you can be trolled in the most vicious way.
Well, we've all, I've been trolled. We've all been trolled. That is what happens to, I think, but a lot of people, social media is that, where if you're speaking out anyway, I guess you have to admit that that's going to happen to you. I think you kind of have to either be prepared to get out there and do it and take that and somehow find a way to cope with it. But that is absolutely true, and I get it, and everyone else gets it, and women get it much worse in general. So difficult. We are running out of time. I do have to close the public event for those watching on the live streaming sites. Thank you very, very much. Don't steal any books on the way out of the library. That's not the point. But a pleasure, and thank you very much to those who sent in questions. For those of you here, the more conversation will continue outside. The event continues till 10 o'clock. There'll be food and drink outside in the networking spaces. Please, obviously, have a look at the winning books as they're strewn around. And so strewn, they are strewn. That is the correct use of the word strewn. That's the I'm dreading you saying that you know the person who carefully placed them. But anyway, they're scattered. Scattered, I say scattered, all right? We're happy with scattered.
Distributed.
Distributed, yeah.
Distributed.
Flung wildly into the room from one central box. It has been a pleasure to talk to all three of you. Please continue your excellent work. Don't write a book about stones on the beach. But more than anything else, write the book.
Yes,
please write the book. If you like. Could you please give a round of applause to our panel? That's our panel. Thanks to the Royal Society. Thanks to the British Library. The 30th winner of the prize will be announced at an awards ceremony on the 19th of September. I think the shortlist and long list is possibly already available. Is it? It is all available. At this stage, yes. But again, thank you all for attending. We'll see you outside. And once again, could you please give a round of applause to the three members of our panel, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, I'm going to follow in the correct order. The chair's fine. It's great. Vivienne Parry, ladies and gentlemen, Mark Miodownik, and Dame Jocelyn Bell Burnell. Ladies, thank you.
Thank you, sir.